For 7 years, my life followed one exhausting pattern. Hope, effort, silence, and then repeat. I used to believe persistence was proof of love. That if I stayed kind, patient, and present long enough, she would eventually see me. I built my entire emotional world around that belief. What I didn't realize was that while I was standing still, waiting, she was living comfortably in a space where my feelings were optional. That changed on a Tuesday morning. I remember it clearly, not because something dramatic happened, but because nothing did. And somehow, that was worse. I woke up before my alarm, staring at the ceiling, feeling oddly calm. No racing heart, no urge to check my phone, no rehearsed conversations in my head. For the first time in years, I didn't wonder what message I might send her that day. I got dressed slowly, deliberately, like someone who had finally made a decision and didn't need to rush anymore. At work, I arrived late on purpose. Not because I was careless, but because I wanted to see if it still mattered. Our office floor was designed in a way that made avoidance difficult. The main walkway cut straight through the center, passing her desk. For years, I used that path like a ritual, pretending coincidence, slowing my steps, hoping she'd look up. Sometimes she did. Sometimes she smiled. Most days, she didn't. That morning, I took the side entrance. I sat down at my desk without looking around, opened my laptop, and started working as if she didn't exist. At exactly 10:02 a.m., my screen lit up with a message notification. Her name. I didn't open it. I hovered over the preview just long enough to recognize the tone. Careful, polite, slightly urgent. The kind of message that says I don't want to lose access to you, not I'm afraid of losing you. I deleted it. At 11:17, another message came through. Longer this time. More emotional. Probably a question. Probably confusion. Delete. I didn't feel angry. That surprised me. I felt clay, like someone who had stepped out of a noisy room and finally noticed the silence. At lunch, one of my coworkers stopped by my desk. He leaned against the divider, lowering his voice like he was sharing forbidden information. Did something happen between you two? I didn't look up from my screen. There was never a between, I said. He hesitated. She seemed upset, asked why you weren't responding. I paused my typing, then smiled, not bitterly, not sarcastically, just tired. I spent 7 years explaining myself. I said, I'm done. He nodded slowly, like someone realizing a story they believe had a very different ending than expected. The afternoon passed quietly, too quietly. At around 3 p.m., I sensed someone standing near my desk. Not moving, waiting. I kept typing. After a few seconds, she spoke. Are you seriously ignoring me? Her voice wasn't angry yet. It was confused, off balance. She wasn't used to this version of me. I finally looked up. I'm working, I said evenly. If this is about a task, email me. Her eyebrows tightened. And if it's not, then there's nothing to discuss. She stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. You send my things back, she said. Why would you do that? I returned what belonged to you. That's not an answer. It is to me. Her voice wavered. Are you punishing me? I leaned back slightly, folding my hands. For a moment, I considered softening my tone. Old habits die hard. But then I remembered every unanswered message, every canceled plan, every moment I stood beside her while she looked past me. I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm choosing myself. Her face lost color. I put my headphones on and turned back to my screen. The conversation was over. She didn't leave immediately. I could feel her standing there, waiting for me to turn around, to take it back, to explain. I didn't. Eventually, she walked away. That evening, an automated email popped up in my inbox. A mandatory project meeting scheduled for the next morning. As I scanned the attendee list, one name stood out. Hers. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then replied with a single sentence. I will be unavailable due to illness. The next morning, I sat in a clinic waiting room, perfectly healthy, scrolling through news articles I didn't care about. When the doctor asked why I was there, I described vague symptoms, tight chest, short breath, stress. He ran tests. Everything came back normal. Nothing wrong with you, he said kindly. I know, I thought. Back at the office, the meeting was already over. A coworker caught me near the elevators. She kept asking where you were, he said. She was not happy. I shrugged. That afternoon, she confronted me again. You skipped it on purpose. I was sick. You're lying. I held up the doctor's note. Are you qualified to diagnose people now? Her face flushed, but she didn't respond. From that day forward, we entered a quiet standoff. I kept things professional, brief, distant. If she needed something work-related, I redirected her to official channels. If she tried to start a personal conversation, I politely declined. A week later, the pressure finally cracked. She blocked my path near the break area, eyes glassy, breathing shallow. What do you want from me? She demanded. I filled a glass with water calmly. I want to work in peace. She stepped closer. Is this about what happened? I can explain. Don't, I said softly. Her voice broke. How can you act like none of this mattered? I looked at her, not with anger, not with longing, but with the clarity of someone who had already grieved. Knowing someone for years doesn't mean they valued you, I said. Tears fell freely now. You're being cruel. I shook my head. I was devoted, I said. And that wasn't enough. I walked past her, leaving her alone in the quiet room. That night, I received another email. A promotion, a new project, a new responsibility, and the name of someone from her world attached to it. I laughed once, softly, not because it was funny, but because I finally understood. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a power shift. The email looked harmless at first, just another corporate announcement. Neutral subject line, polite language. But as I read it more carefully, something tightened in my chest. Not fear, not anger, but recognition. A strategic partnership, a high-visibility project, and my name listed as technical lead. I should have felt proud. This was the kind of opportunity people worked years to earn. The kind of thing that changed careers. Instead, I felt suspicious. I scrolled down to the partner company's name, and that's when I understood the trap. It was the firm she had always admired. The place she talked about whenever she wanted to remind me of what ambition looked like. And more importantly, it was where the man she compared me to had gone. Coincidence didn't exist in situations like this. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, replaying every recent interaction. The sudden urgency in her messages. The frustration in her voice. The way she looked at me when she realized I wasn't chasing anymore. This wasn't about work. This was about control. By the afternoon, rumors were already moving faster than emails. People stopped by my desk under the excuse of collaboration, curiosity hiding behind smiles. You must be excited, one of them said. This is huge for you, another added. I nodded politely, said all the right things. Inside, I was calculating. If I accepted this, I would be forced into constant proximity with people who still lived in her orbit. Meetings, calls, shared decisions, moments where she could pretend we were still connected. That was exactly what she wanted. I stood up and walked straight to the technology director's office. He looked surprised to see me. Everything okay? I'd like to be reassigned, I said. He blinked. From the project? Yes. He leaned back, studying me. That doesn't make sense. This is a major step forward. Not for me. His voice hardened slightly. You don't just walk away from opportunities like this. I can, I said, and I will. There was a long pause. The kind where authority expects compliance. What's going on with you lately? He asked. Your performance is solid, but your attitude. If participation is mandatory, I interrupted calmly, then consider this my resignation. Silence. He stared at me like I'd spoken recklessly, like I was bluffing. I wasn't. In the end, he approved my transfer. Officially, it was framed as a strategic adjustment. Unofficially, everyone knew I had almost walked away from my job just to avoid one person. And she knew it too. By the time I left the building that evening, the hallway felt different. Conversation stopped when I passed. Eyes followed me. The story had already grown legs. She was waiting near the exit. You've lost your mind, she said the moment she saw me. You'd throw away everything just to get away from me. I met her gaze, steady and calm. If distance is the only way to breathe, I said, then yes. Her composure collapsed. She didn't yell. She didn't accuse. She just stood there, staring at me like the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Why are you doing this? She whispered. I never hurt you. I exhaled slowly. You truly believe that? I asked. She nodded, tears gathering. I never meant to. I stepped closer, not aggressively, not emotionally, just close enough that she had to listen. For 7 years, I said quietly, I remembered every important date in your life. Her lips parted. When is my birthday? She froze. I waited. 5 seconds. 10. Nothing. Where were you when I was sick? I continued. Did you ever ask if I made it home safely after working late? Her eyes dropped. You were busy, she murmured. Busy enough to celebrate other people, I said. Busy enough to show up when it wasn't me. Her breathing became uneven. I didn't know you felt this way, she said. That's the problem, I replied. You never knew, because you never looked. She reached for my arm. I stepped back. This version of me, I said, exists because the old one finally gave up. I walked past her and into the night. At home, the silence felt heavier, but cleaner. I sat alone, thinking about how strange it was that the moment I stopped asking for her attention, the world seemed to offer me something else. Clarity. That week, I worked harder than ever, not to prove anything, but because I finally had energy. No distractions, no emotional debts. People noticed. Messages came in. New responsibilities followed. For the first time, my value wasn't tied to how available I was to someone else. And then, late one evening, my phone buzzed. A message I didn't expect. Not from her. From someone who knew the story better than she ever did. I stayed at the screen, heart slowing, mind sharpening. Because whatever was coming next was going to change the balance completely. The message stayed on my screen longer than it should have. I didn't open it right away. Not because I was afraid of what it said, but because I wasn't sure how much access I wanted to give anyone anymore. That was new for me. For most of my life, I responded immediately. Availability was my currency. Now, silence was. When I finally read it, there was no drama in the words. Just respect. Recognition. An invitation that didn't demand anything from me. It came from someone who had watched everything unfold quietly. Someone who saw the long nights, the quiet consistency, the way I never complained even when it cost me. They didn't ask how I was feeling. They asked what I was building. That question lingered with me. For years, I had built myself around someone else. My schedule, my priorities, my emotional bandwidth. All of it shaped by the hope that one day, she would choose me. But now, for the first time, I was building something that didn't require permission. The days that followed were different. Not louder, not easier, just lighter. I started arriving early, not to be seen, but because I wanted to. I took ownership of projects without waiting for validation. I spoke in meetings without measuring how my confidence might make someone uncomfortable. People listened. One afternoon, I caught my reflection in the glass of a conference room. I didn't recognize the man staring back at me. Not because he looked stronger, but because he looked undistracted. That version of me had never existed before. She tried to reach out again. Not with apologies. Not with explanations. With memories. Remember when we stayed late and ordered food? Remember that inside joke only we shared? I didn't respond. Nostalgia is a powerful trap. It convinces you that shared time equals shared depth. But memories don't measure effort. They don't measure absence. A few days later, she showed up where she knew I'd be. It wasn't accidental. I don't understand you anymore, she said, standing across from me. You've changed. I nodded. That was the point. Her voice softened. I feel like I lost you without being warned. I looked at her steadily. You were warned. You just didn't think I'd ever leave. That hit her harder than anger ever could. She searched my face, looking for cracks. For hesitation. For the man who used to wait. He wasn't there. What if I'm ready now? She asked quietly. The old version of me would have felt relief. Validation. Victory. This version felt something else. Distance. Ready for what? I asked. For us. I considered the question carefully. For years, I said, I wanted to be chosen. Now, I'm choosing. Her eyes filled with tears again, but I didn't feel responsible for them. That was another difference. I wasn't cruel. I just wasn't carrying what wasn't mine. I walked away. That evening, I accepted the invitation from a message. Not as an escape, but as a step forward. The opportunity wasn't flashy. It was strategic. It put me in rooms I'd never been invited to before. Conversations shifted. People asked for my opinion, not out of politeness, but because it mattered. My name started coming up in places I wasn't present. That's when I understood something important. Power doesn't announce itself. It circulates quietly. She noticed the shift before I did. The way others spoke to me. The way decisions passed through me. The way I no longer needed her presence to feel seen. One afternoon, I overheard her talking to someone else. Not intentionally, but clearly. "Is not the same," she said. "I don't know how to reach him." I didn't interrupt, because the truth was simple. She never knew how. By the end of that month, I had options. Real ones. Not fantasies. Not emotional compromises. And for the first time in my life, I didn't rush to choose. I went home that night, poured a glass of water, and stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. I thought about how strange it was that losing someone could feel like gaining clarity. That walking away didn't shrink me, it sharpened me. And somewhere behind me, my phone buzzed again. Another message. Another door. But this one came with consequences she wasn't ready for. I didn't realize how far things had moved until I walked into a room and felt it. The pause. Not awkward. Not forced. Just long enough for people to register my presence. A few months earlier, I would have filled that silence with a smile, a joke, something harmless to keep myself small. This time, I didn't. I took my seat. The meeting began, and within minutes, the dynamic revealed itself. Questions came to me, not because I spoke the loudest, but because my answers were expected. Decisions shifted direction after I spoke. Notes were taken when I paused. Across the table, I felt her watching, not with admiration, with confusion. She wasn't used to seeing me here, not at the center, not influencing outcomes, not being deferred to. Halfway through the meeting, someone referenced a technical challenge. Before I could respond, another voice spoke. "Let's wait for his input." That was the moment. I saw it on her face. The realization that whatever she thought she understood about me was incomplete. After the meeting, people gathered around my seat. Quick questions. Follow-ups. Future plans. I answered calmly, efficiently, without over-explaining. She lingered at the edge of the room, unsure how to approach me in this setting. When she finally did, her voice was careful. "I didn't know you were involved at this level." "I wasn't," I said. "Not before." There was so much in that sentence she couldn't respond to. A week later, an internal announcement went out. A new leadership structure. My name attached to a role that didn't exist when I first joined the company. The congratulations came in waves. She didn't send one. Instead, she asked to talk. We met in a neutral space. No memories attached. No familiar corners to soften the truth. "You never told me you wanted more," she said. I folded my hands. "I told you. You just didn't hear urgency in my voice." She shook her head slowly. "I didn't think you'd change." "That wasn't your mistake," I replied, thinking I wouldn't. Her composure cracked. "I feel like I missed something important," she said. "You did," I answered. "You missed the moment I stopped asking." There was a long silence between us. "You don't look angry," she said finally. "I'm not." That almost makes it worse. I didn't argue. In the weeks that followed, our paths crossed more often, but in different ways. She wasn't the center anymore. She was adjacent, peripheral. Others noticed too. People who once only approached me through her now spoke to me directly. Invitations came without her name attached. Conversations didn't pause when she entered the room. She felt it. One afternoon, she said something that surprised me. "I don't recognize my place anymore." I considered that. "Neither do I," I said. But that's how growth works. She looked at me like she wanted to ask for reassurance. Like she wanted me to anchor her the way I once had. I didn't. Because I finally understood something I wish I had learned sooner. You don't lose people when you grow. You outgrow the version of them that needed you smaller. The final shift came quietly. A public acknowledgement. A visible responsibility. A decision that placed me on a path she couldn't follow. Not because she wasn't capable, but because she was too late. When the announcement was made, I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. By then, she was no longer part of the equation. And for the first time, that fact didn't hurt. It felt like closure. The strangest part about moving forward is realizing you don't feel the need to look back. There was a time when I imagined this moment differently. I thought there would be a dramatic confrontation, a confession, an apology that arrived too late and hurt just enough to feel like justice. None of that happened. What arrived instead was silence. Not the painful kind, the clean kind. The kind that comes after a storm when everything unnecessary has already been torn away. Weeks passed. We worked in the same building, attended overlapping meetings, and existed in the same professional ecosystem. But something fundamental had changed. I was no longer emotionally reachable. She noticed. One afternoon, she approached me carefully, like someone stepping onto unfamiliar ground. "You seem settled," she said. I considered the word. I replied. She nodded, staring at the floor. "I thought if I gave you space, you'd come back." I looked at her gently. I didn't need space. I needed respect. That was the last real conversation we had. After that, her presence faded naturally. No conflict, no hostility, just distance doing what it does best, revealing truth. Around that time, I accepted a new role, more responsibility, more influence. Not because I was chasing success, but because success no longer felt like something I had to prove. People asked me how it felt. I always gave the same answer. Quiet. Because that's what peace sounds like when you finally stop negotiating your worth. One evening, I found an old box while cleaning my apartment. Inside were small things I had forgotten. Receipts, notes, memories I once thought were priceless. I didn't feel sadness. I felt gratitude. Not for the pain, but for the lesson. I learned that consistency without boundaries becomes self-neglect. That being chosen late isn't the same as being valued early. And that walking away doesn't make you weak, it makes you honest. I threw the box away. Not because it didn't matter anymore, but because it already had. Months later, I heard through someone else that she had asked about me. "How is he?" she'd said. The answer came easily. "He's doing well." That was enough. I didn't need her regret. I didn't need validation. I didn't even need closure. Because closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you decide. Looking back now, I understand why things unfolded the way they did. If she had chosen me earlier, I might never have chosen myself. And that would have been the real loss. So if you're listening to this and standing where I once stood, waiting, hoping, shrinking, know this. The moment you stop chasing what doesn't choose you, life starts making room for what will. And sometimes, the greatest power shift isn't when someone wants you back. It's when you no longer want them at all.